Ajahn, greetings. It was very helpfully mentioned how the lens of traditional commentaries can, in spite of the best intentions, distort the meaning in the suttas and give a misleading interpretive impression of how things unfold. Do you also find commentarial influences significantly affecting the phrases of the suttas themselves here and there, or not to any important extent?
Occasionally, they do affect the phrasing of the suttas, and this has been shown by certain scholars, like the very famous monk, not very famous, but scholarly famous, Venerable Analayo. He has shown that the commentaries sometimes make their way into the suttas. And the reason why that happens is because in the early period of Buddhism, when they would chant the suttas, they would recite the suttas, very often they would recite the commentary together with the sutta. And sometimes they were not able to distinguish properly between the sutta and the commentary. So there would be like a little bit of merger sometimes. So the commentary would become part of the sutta and that sort of thing. And he has shown that this actually happened. He can show that by comparing the translation into Chinese with the Pali version. And he can show that sometimes what is found in the Pali commentaries is actually found in the sutta in Chinese. And so we can assume that the opposite is also true, that sometimes the commentaries would have affected also the Pali suttas. So I think that that is safe to say. And we also know from modern Buddhism, we know that sometimes we have different versions of the suttas. For example, you find the Pali suttas in Thai, you find them in Burma, you can find them in Sri Lanka, and sometimes there are small differences. And sometimes you can see that the commentary explanation has gotten into the sutta in one of those traditions, but not in the others. And it's very easy to see because one of the tradition has the wording of the commentary, whereas the others do not. So obviously the commentary has had some influence. So we can know that the commentaries had some influence on the actual wording of the sutta. But it is rare, it is not a very common occurrence. It is something that is, we can usually, often we can see it, maybe not always, there may be times when we cannot see it, but often there is a feeling that things are not quite right, perhaps, or you can do a comparative study and these kind of things. But remember that it doesn't matter all that much. One of the safe ways of studying the suttas is to always remember that what you find in many different places, you find again and again in the suttas in very different places, that is very likely to be the word of the Buddha, because you find it everywhere, different contexts, different people, slightly different angles on the same thing. And because of that, you can be, as long as you stick with the majority view, the most important parts of the suttas, you're not going to go wrong. But if you find something strange or unusual that maybe you find in only one place, then you should be careful with taking that as the absolute word of the Buddha, especially if it contradicts the rest of the Buddha's message. So I would say it is not a big danger, but we know that, yes, it does happen sometimes.
Thank you. Dear Ajahn, how does one be a kind boss? I want to be kind to the staff who are not very competent and give them second chances. But the more competent staff end up overworked, having to take over their work and feeling resentment. How do we be kind and hold people responsible for their work, and if inevitably let them go?
This is difficult. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. These things are always hard, and it's hard to know what to do. But I think one of the things to do is to remember that if someone is lazy and not pulling their weight, perhaps, then remember that it's just conditioning. It is not that they really want to be lazy, but very often they have some inner suffering that makes it hard for them to work. They may not have enough mindfulness to really be aware of what is going on. They may lack the qualities that make hard work possible. Maybe they were brought up in a family where hard work was not encouraged. They don't really understand what hard work means. There's always a reason why people are the way they are. And because there is a reason, even though they may not be doing their job, then have compassion for them. And then there are other people who have to carry, kind of work harder because they're not doing their job. Well, there's two ways for those other people to react. Either is to say, okay, actually, I know how to do this. I will take the opportunity to make some good karma and live and do the right thing. That is one way to think. Or it is also to recognize that all of us can only do so much. Yeah. So sometimes the competent staff, they also have to set limits and to have to say, well, actually, this is all I'm going to do because my life, I want to have a life apart from work. Everything cannot just be work. Yeah, I want to go on retreats occasionally. I want to do all of these other worthwhile things. And that is fair enough. Yeah, we cannot really expect the competent staff to take up all the slack. Yeah? But the nice way of thinking about it is, okay, this gives me an opportunity to be kind. Yeah, because these other people, okay, they haven't got the abilities, they haven't got the courage, they haven't got whatever, the upbringing, the background, the conditioning, the past lives, the parents, whatever it is. Something is missing inside of them that stops them from being able to do the right thing. So compassion is always the right way to go. Try to see if you can find a way through. And if you have to let them go, if you have to fire them, to be direct, then okay, sometimes maybe we have to fire people. Sometimes it's necessary because otherwise the company doesn't work. It's okay. Do it with compassion. Try to help them to find a new job. Write them a letter of recommendation which talks about their strong points. Everyone has strong points. Yeah. If you do things in the right way, then there is no bad outcome. Then you're doing things in a good way.
Thank you, Ajahn. To follow up on the question on compassion, sometimes mudita is translated as empathetic joy or sympathetic joy. That is not a good translation, just as empathy is not the same as compassion.
Yeah, I think sympathetic joy is better than empathetic joy. So I would call it sympathetic joy. It's probably better. So it means that sympathetic joy just means that you rejoice. Yeah, if other people are successful, if someone at the BGF gets into a deep state of samadhi, you think, yay, well done. What a wonderful thing it is that you had some success in your meditation. Yeah, and you encourage them. And you are not jealous or anything like that about their success, but you feel wonderful that other people were successful. That is really sympathetic joy. That can never be wrong. I think empathetic joy is, I guess maybe you have empathy for their good qualities. That is maybe where empathy is okay, but when you have empathy with suffering, that's when it becomes problematic. Yeah.
Ajahn, could you kindly clarify your point that we do not own our karma? I always thought that we are heir to our karma, even though it continues to change depending on our needs and actions.
Well, I suppose that karma, it is true, the Buddha says that we own our karma. I think it should not be taken as absolute, like we have it forever, ever after. The karma changes. Sometimes karma can be exhausted, if we live in a certain way, and certain karma may be not kind of fully exhausted, but almost exhausted. Especially if you become a stream entry, for example, then you can exhaust certain karmas completely. And there are certain karmas that are so long ago, so many eons ago, that they don't really have any effect on you anymore. So I would say that karma is, you own it much, much, much more than you own your ordinary possession. 1,000,000 times more than you own your ordinary possessions. But even if you own them 1,000,000 times more, it is not like a complete ownership that you will have it forever and ever after. The more it fades into the background, the less kind of effect it has on you in the future. So you own your karma, even that is to some extent limited, I would say. But it is, you can almost take it as ownership. It is very close to the idea of ownership, but there's a limitation.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, how can I differentiate between letting go of attachments and being indifferent? I want to live a good life, have a fulfilling career, be in the company of good friends. Can I have these desires? What would be the Buddha's advice for me?
um, so the difference between, first of all, letting go of attachments and being indifferent, that's the first part of the question. So being indifferent just is a kind of bland state of mind where you don't really care about things, yeah? You don't really care, and yeah, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And that is not what detachment is. Detachment comes from insight. Detachment comes from understanding that something is not worth pursuing. And because you understand that something is not worth pursuing, you don't pursue it anymore. So for example, you understand that being a bad person, doing bad things is not really worthwhile. So you detach from doing bad things. You're not interested in stealing anymore. You're not interested in killing, even insects you don't want to kill. Yeah, you want to be kind. So detachment comes from insight. Indifference comes from a lack of caring, a lack of really, you kind of the world, whatever. I don't care about those things. So, for example, you can be indifferent about Buddhism. And if you are indifferent about Buddhism, it just means that you are deluded, because the Dhamma of the Buddha is such a beautiful teaching. If you have any wisdom, you will not be indifferent to it. You will be interested in it. So indifference can often be stupid, but detachment is always wise. That is the difference. Then you say you want to have a good career and you want to have friends and all these kind of things. Sure, fine, no problem. You can have a good career. It is no problem. But just remember that even if you have a good career, even if you have many good friends and all of these things, remember to always do these things with kindness. Yeah, don't allow your career to become so important to you that you are willing to let go of kindness. If the career becomes so important that you are willing to take shortcuts, you're willing to deceive people, you're willing to backstab, you're willing to engage in office politics, you're willing to do all kind of nasty things, well, actually what you're doing is you're just building up suffering for yourself for the long run. That is what you're really doing. If you want a career, the reason you want a career is because you think it will give you happiness. That's the only reason you want a career. Yeah. But if you want real happiness, you have to be kind, because in the long run, that is what will give you happiness. So remember why you want things. Why do you want friends? Why do you want a career? All of these things have to do, you want because you want to be a happy person. But actually, what will really give you happiness in the long run, these things will give you a tiny bit of happiness. But what will give you real happiness is your conduct, how you live well. So please have a career, but be very careful with how you have the career. Have the career together with kindness, together with spiritual qualities, then it is okay. If you have the career in the wrong way, then it is not okay.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, does the general idea of living life to the fullest or living life passionately need to feel alive leads one towards more attachment to sensual pleasures in Buddhist view?
Yeah, I mean, living life fully, this is the thing, is that people have this idea of living life fully. You want to go into the world and enjoy yourself and all of these kind of things, but you're not actually living life fully. It's just a saying in the world. People say these things without really understanding what it means. You're not living life fully because actually you still feel craving, you still feel attachments, you still feel the emptiness inside. It doesn't give that satisfaction that you want. Living life fully means feeling full within. It means that you feel complete inside of yourself. It means that you are not being pushed around by craving in this way. That is what living a full life means. If you see a person who is really content and really happy, like some of these great people, great meditators in the world, they are living life fully because they have no more needs. They have no more cravings. They are completely, utterly happy the way things are. So we misunderstand what it means to live life fully. We think we're living life fully, but actually we're living life emptily. It is an empty kind of existence. It does not lead to real fulfillment. So we need to be, I always like to see that we we all are sheep. Yeah, we're always following along the herd. Everyone says, yeah, you must live life fully. And you say, bah, bah, and you follow along like one of these sheep. Yeah, and you think like everyone else does. Don't be afraid of challenging the consensus. Don't be afraid of challenging how other people think. When they say living life fully, they don't know what they mean. They don't know what they're talking about. People are blind. People have a shallow understanding of life, a shallow understanding of existence. If you want to be a sheep, be a black sheep. The black sheep are the best because the black sheep, they dare to stand out. They dare to go against the stream. They dare to think about things in the wrong way. Black sheep are great. Yeah, my favorite sheep are the black sheep. But, you know, this was what I was saying before, is that actually what we should really say is that the majority of sheep are actually black, and it is the white sheep that stands out. Yeah, because if you are going to be the white sheep in the flock of black sheep, that is like the saintly sheep, yeah, in the flock of all the ordinary people who don't really know what they're doing. So all the sheep are actually, should really be black, and then you should be the one white one. That is the right way of thinking about it. Don't be afraid of thinking independently. Too many people just follow the crowd. Where does that lead them? It leads them absolutely nowhere. You just become like everyone else. You have the same suffering as everyone else. You end up dying, and then when you die, you think, whoa, what happened? I've been living this life, and now everything has to go. Have I wasted my time? What was the point of doing all of these things? And now everything has to go. Everything I have built up, all the possessions that I have accumulated, all the money I have made, all the relationships that I have created through my life, everything has to go. I'm naked. I'm left empty-handed. And in the process of doing all of those things, I have made bad karma because I thought these things were so important. It was acceptable to take shortcuts to get these things. So not only have you got nothing left when you die, you have less than nothing left because you have done bad things that also leads to a bad future. Imagine how you feel on your deathbed. You feel terrible. You realize that you have wasted your life. You had an opportunity to practice and live in the right way, to do what is good, to build up good inner qualities. You wasted the opportunity. You feel terrible when you die. Don't waste the opportunity. Don't think that living to the life, to the full, means going out and enjoying yourself in the ordinary way. If you want to live life to the full, actually, there's only one way to do that, practicing the spiritual path.
Thank you, Bante. Sukyo to Bante. Most Buddhist countries are seen as comparatively underdeveloped economically, though not necessarily less corrupted and less violent politically, and also not necessarily more developed spiritually. Could it be due to some misinterpretation of the need for material development vis-a-vis the need to letting go of the attachment therefrom?
I could it be a misunderstanding of the need for material development? I don't know. I mean, you know, Buddhist countries. The point is that countries are not really Buddhist. I think this is the first point to remember. People are Buddhist, not countries. And it is true that there are some countries where there is a majority of Buddhists, and that's kind of the people we normally think of as Buddhist countries. But the degree to which people are Buddhist is often very shallow. It doesn't go very deep. Yeah, they are Buddhist on the surface. It is an identity that they have. I am Buddhist. It becomes your identity. It doesn't mean that you practice the Buddhist teachings. Yeah, it doesn't mean you do things in the right way. So very often there's a very weak connection between the nature of the country and the majority belief of the population. It doesn't really follow that just because you are a Buddhist country, somehow you will be more advanced or more successful in any of these kind of things. Yeah, so I don't think, does it have a misunderstanding? I mean, Maybe another possibility is that people become Buddhists. They get born in a Buddhist country because they don't care so much about material things. Yeah, that's another possibility. Precisely because they realize that actually the material things don't matter so much at all. What matters more is to be reborn in a Buddhist place where the majority is Buddhist, so that I can practice the Buddhist teachings. That is more important. And if everyone thinks like that, well, then the country is not going to develop materially because everyone just wants to do the right thing. I don't think that is the truth, but that may be part of the truth. Maybe there's a little bit like that. But in the end, I think that there isn't any real link between whether a country is Buddhist and the success of the country in terms of politics or in terms of material things and all of these kind of things. I think this is all kind of very tangential and very uncertain. Sometimes you hear that, Christian people, they will say to a Buddhist, look at the United States, very successful, everyone there is a Christian, so you should also be a Christian. If you want to be successful, you should be a Christian. It's complete nonsense. It's kind of, I don't know how they can say that with a straight face, because obviously it is complete nonsense. If you look at some of the world's most successful societies, America is not that successful. There are some wealthy people, they have lots of social problems, they have lots of political problems. Far more successful countries in the world are like the Nordic countries, like where I come from, where I was born, much more successful. Those countries are not Christian anymore. They have given up on Christianity a long time ago. So is it Christianity that makes you successful? Or is it the attitude of the people? Is it the governments? Is it the accidents of history that make you successful? It is the accidents of history that are far more important, right? It's got nothing to do with Christianity. So, or maybe that's exaggerating, but maybe Christianity has a little bit to do with it, because Christianity has the idea that you should work really hard, but it has nothing to do with believing in God. It has to do with the kind of the worldly outlook of Christianity, the idea of hard work and these kind of things. So believing in God is not really the issue. So I think all of these things are very shallow ways of thinking about the world. And if you become a Christian because that will somehow make you more wealthy, then I think you have a very shallow understanding of what really matters in life. Wealth is not going to make you happy anyway. That is not the path to happiness. That is not going to get you anywhere. What matters are the spiritual qualities in your life. So sometimes we buy into these ideas that are really silly and really stupid. And if people are convinced by these kind of things, well, okay, maybe they can become a Christian then, because they mean they don't have a deep understanding of the spirituality in the first place.
Yeah, Chan. When the pandemic affected the world, humans are affected and they cannot chase after material enjoyment as much as they wish. Some see this as an opportunity to slow down and give themselves a chance to detach, give our Mother Earth a chance to eradicate wastage and toxic pollutants. Some with wrong views see this as a misfortune and become depressed for being unable to lead a usual life. How to help the depressed?
To help the depressed is that is like what I was talking about before. Your attitude when there is a war in Ukraine. What is the right kind of attitude in that war in Ukraine? Well, it is to remember that whatever happens in the world, that is not where your future is made. Your future does not depend on whether there is a pandemic. Your future does not depend on whether there's a war in Ukraine. Your future does not depend on whether your family members die even. Your future does not even depend on whether you die. Even if you die, it's not an issue. Your future depends entirely on how you live your life. Live your life well, then you will have a good future. That is really what matters. So remind people, especially if they have some kind of spiritual leanings, and if they have some kind of insight into their own mind, ask them to look into their own mind. Ask them to understand the connection between how you act, how you live, and how you feel about yourself. And anyone who has a bit of clarity in the mind will see that when we live with good intentions, we feel good about ourselves. And that is so true, right here and right now. Yeah, act with kindness towards somebody and you feel good about yourself. Act in a nasty way towards somebody and you feel bad about yourself. We know that this already is karma. Karma right there, happening in this very life, is what you actually see when you do that. So remind people that actually the world comes and goes. Sometimes there are disasters in the world. Sometimes terrible things happen in your family or whatever it is. But it is not the thing in itself that is good or bad. It is how you deal with it. If you deal with it in a good way, if you deal with it by understanding that the world is problematic and need to find refuge somewhere else, it is going to be very powerful and very helpful in your practice. So bad things can be good. Good things can be bad. Because if you are too successful and everything is kind of going really well for you, yeah, and then you become complacent. As I said before, when you become complacent, you stop living in the right way, and because you stop living in the right way, then of course your future is being destroyed. So what is good and what is bad is really entirely depends on how you deal with it. And this is why I love the story that Ajahn Brahm tells all the time, the story of good, bad, who knows? Nothing is really good and bad as such. It is how we deal with it that makes it good or bad. Is the pandemic good or bad? Well, deal with it in a good way, and it's going to be positive for you. Is the war in Ukraine good or bad? Well, it depends entirely how you deal with it. If it makes you a better person, which it should ideally do, because it reminds you of the shortcomings of the world, and if it reminds you of the shortcomings of the world, then it reminds you of the importance of the spiritual path. It makes you a better person, then it becomes very powerful. So deal with things in the right way, then you're going to be okay.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, could you please explain why the Buddha always refers to Nibbana as the far shore? Isn't Nibbana a mind state? Could you please explain what exactly is enlightenment and what exactly is Nibbana?
Okay, so the far shore. So the idea is that it's just it's a metaphor, it's a simile that the Buddha uses. Yeah, the near shore. This is where we are now. We are here, and somehow we are trying to get somewhere else than where we are now. And the Buddha uses the idea that this somewhere else is called the far shore. We're trying to cross like a treacherous and dangerous terrain. We're trying to cross the ocean or cross the stream, yeah? And the stream that we are crossing is usually a metaphor for samsara, the round of rebirth. So when we're crossing the stream, there's all of these dangers in the stream. There's a danger of stranding in the stream. There's a danger of being swept away by the flood. There's a danger of crocodiles or whatever in that stream. So we have to kind of find our way through the stream. We have to be like superheroes and find our way, the way through. And then when we find our way through that stream, then we eventually reach the far shore. That is kind of the idea. It's a nice metaphor because it shows the dangers, the things that we have to cross and we have to get somewhere else. The near shore is what we are, where we are. We're trying to reach, to attain some other kind of state. So what is that state? What is Nibbana? And it's a very interesting question, right? And it's very often misunderstood what it means. And in the suttas, what Nibbana actually means, it means the state of enlightenment. That's what it means. So when you are an arahant, you have attained Nibbana. That is what it means to be an arahant, that you have attained Nibbana. So an arahant is always experiencing Nibbana. What is that Nibbana that the arahant has attained? Well, that Nibbana is the ending of suffering. Yeah, there is no suffering for the arahant. Or maybe you can say there is a very slight kind of suffering, which is just having the physical body. But for all practical purposes, the suffering has come to an end. Yeah, that's why it's called Nibbana. Nibbana means extinguishment. Extinguishment of what? Well, primarily extinguishment of suffering. That extinguishment happens in this very life. That's why the arahant has attained Nibbana. Nibbana also means the extinguishment of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah, when you give up greed, hatred, and delusion, they are extinguished. These are the fires of the mind. They are called the Agi Kanda, the great mass of fires in many places in the suttas. So they are also extinguished. Yeah? So you have the extinguishment of the defilements, you have the extinguishment of suffering. Yeah? And of course, you can also say that you have extinguished rebirth. You have extinguished samsara, the idea of being reborn in the future. There is no more rebirth. That too has been extinguished. So this is the main meaning of Nibbana, is actually the state of being an arahant in the world, or being someone who's fully awakened or fully enlightened. There's also the idea of Nibbana, what happens when the arahant dies? After the arahant dies. Occasionally, Nibbana is used in this sense in the suttas. It's called the aparisesa Nibbana, the Nibbana without residue or without remainder. It is only called that, I think, once in the suttas, in the place in the Itivuttaka, one of the books of the Khuddaka Nikaya. They are the shorter collection or whatever. That is where it is found, and that is the state. What happens after the arahant dies, after the Buddha dies? What happens then? Well, the Buddha says what happens then is that everything becomes cool. Yeah, you become the cool one. Siti Bhutto is the Pali word for that. You become cool. Yeah, everything cools down. I've been trying to get some of the monks here to take the name Siti Bhutto, so I can go around calling them the cool one. This is the cool monk. That would be a nice name to have, the cool monk. I think anyway, it's a kind of higher. So Siti Bhutto, I think, is a really nice name for a monk. But so far, I have not succeeded. No one wants to take the name, the cool monk. So I feel really kind of dejected about that. But still, this is what it means. Yeah, everything becomes cool. Whatever there was to be felt before, you no longer feel. Nibbana is then the final extinguishment, yeah, or the final suffering really comes to an end. So this is really the way to think about Nibbana. It is the highest kind of happiness. And when you understand that Nibbana is the highest kind of happiness, it is the ending of all suffering, then it becomes incredibly attractive. Then it doesn't really matter what it is. Yeah, who cares what it is, whether it is this or that, whether it is complete cessation, the complete ending. If it is the highest happiness, that's good enough, right? That is what really matters. But remember what the Buddha says, as long as there is an aspect of the five khandhas, as long as there is some kind of experience, there will be suffering. So we know at the very least it is the ending of all experience. That is equivalent to the idea of final Nibbana after the arahant dies.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, if our past karma conditioning affects our thinking and choice, how does one overcome one's past poor or bad conditioning, which affects one's ability to make the right choices going forward? Example, not having the opportunity to live life well. Would one be stuck in the bad conditioning then by continuously making wrong choices?
Yeah. Sorry, just before I answer, Bobby, have you got many questions left?
Last one.
Last one. Okay, that's easy. Okay, good. Okay, so that means I just wanted to know how much time I should spend on each question, that's all. So, yes, it is true that we are to some extent trapped by our past karma. Yeah, our past karma kind of makes us who we are now. The person you are now is really a result of your past inclinations, your karma, your habits, all of the things that you have done in the past. But it does not mean that you are entirely trapped, because in this moment, even though what you are now is the sum total of all the conditioning, where you go next, you can choose. Yeah. So if you reflect wisely on the Buddhist teachings, if you try to make the most of your life, then you can change what you have. And this is that beautiful simile that Ajahn Brahm's simile of the baking a cake. Ajahn Brahm has this beautiful teaching of baking a cake. You may be a person who has incredibly bad ingredients, yeah, for the cake. Everything is old and stale and kind of sour and dodgy and hard and bad. The raisins are really hard, and the butter is kind of gone rancid or whatever. So you have incredibly bad ingredients. But because you try incredibly hard, because you put a lot of love and effort into baking that cake, even though your kitchen equipment is crap or whatever, still you make a beautiful cake because you put so much love into it. Very often it is actually the effort that we put in that is more important than anything else. Then you have another person who actually has the best ingredients in the world, a really modern kitchen with the best appliances, and they don't put the love into it. They don't put the proper effort into it, and they still make a bad cake. So we are never trapped entirely by our karma. Our karma can change. We can actually move from where we are, and that is regardless of our conditioning. Of course, there are certain situations in life, let's say that you get reborn in a mafia family, or something like that, then of course the trap is going to be very strong. It's going to be very hard to get out of that. It's going to be hard to get access to Buddhist teachings. It's going to be very difficult, but even then you're not 100% trapped. If you start to get access to some good teachings, you can move out of that gradually. But the general truth is that for many people, it is very hard. Let's say that you are born in a country which is very staunchly Muslim. Say that you are reborn in a place like Afghanistan. How many Buddhists do you think there are in Afghanistan? Not many. If you are a Buddhist, you have to really hide. You can't tell anyone, because if you tell someone, they're going to make life really miserable for you if they know that you're a Buddhist. I know some examples personally, and it's very dangerous to be a Buddhist in those countries. So it makes it very, very hard. So your past choices and past lives, they have led you astray. And now it's very difficult to kind of make up for the mistakes in the past life. You're already on the wrong track in a certain way. But one of the similes that I always come back to in the sutta that gives you some idea of the potential for change, and you have probably heard this simile before, but I'll bring it up again because I think it is very powerful. And this is the simile that of a glass of water and the lump of salt. So the glass of water, the amount of water in the glass symbolizes the good karma that you have made. The lump of salt symbolizes the bad karma. So if you have a lump of salt, you put it in a glass of water, that water is going to become undrinkable because it is a small amount of water and the amount of salt is relatively large. So it can become very unpleasant to drink. If you take the same amount of salt and you put it in a large pond, for example, with lots of water in it, and then you taste the water, you're barely going to be able to taste the salt at all. It is no longer a problem because the amount of good karma you have made, all the water in the pond is the good karma, makes that the result of the bad karma is much less. So regardless of your past, regardless of how you have lived your life, regardless of your conditioning, there are ways out. You can dilute the bad karmas. The bad karma doesn't affect you so much anymore. This is why karma is not fixed. You're not heir of a karma in the same way that you are heir of things in the world. These things are much more flexible, much more malleable. They will change according to how you live your life. So if you live a life with a lot of metta, of care, of compassion, of generosity, and all of these beautiful things, if you have a life of wisdom, etc., it means that you will dilute the bad karma, and over time you will become free, liberated from that past that has been haunting you for so long.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, can you take one more?
Sure.
Dear Ajahn, during difficult times, we naturally want to wish for peace and harmony. Is sending metta and developing compassionate thoughts considered a mental action, which then contributes to our karma? Is that similar to praying?
Is it similar to praying? It depends what you mean by praying. People mean so many different things by praying. Some people think that praying means asking favors from God. That's what some people think. In Buddhism, you have the same thing. In Buddhism, you have people who ask favors of the Buddha. So that basically they're just being like Christians asking favors from God. There's no difference really. We are behaving just like Christians in that sense. But then there is, and that is not, that kind of praying is quite worthless, yeah, from my point of view. Doesn't really add anything. But then there is a deeper kind of prayer, yeah, which is more like meditation. We are trying to access maybe the qualities of God. If you have an idea of what God is, and you know that those are good qualities, and you're trying to tune in to those qualities, well, then it is a bit like our meditation practice, where we're trying to build up good qualities inside by reflecting on the Buddha, reflecting on the Dhamma, by rejoicing in our own good actions. In that sense, it can be the same. So it really depends what you mean by these things, yeah? And this is where we have to be very careful, to be very clear about what we mean. But in the end, yeah, if you have an idea of the wrong idea of prayer, I mean, the problem in Buddhism is that there is no one to pray to, yeah? There's no one to kind of say to, there's no one there that we can kind of speak with in that sense, that the Christians have some kind of communion with God or whatever. That doesn't exist. So even when, from my point of view, when a Christian does prayer and tries to have some kind of communication with God, all they are really doing is that they are accessing something inside of themselves, something beautiful within, and they are accessing that. And when they are accessing that, they call that prayer, they call that communication with God, when really it is just a positive way of meditating or of bringing out your own good qualities, so to speak.
Ajahn, the other part is it considered a mental action contributing to our karma, sending metta, developing compassionate thoughts?
Yes, yeah, it is, absolutely. So when you do compassion and you develop metta, you are doing mental good karma. Yeah, you are certainly developing positive things. And in fact, in the suttas, there is a very interesting sutta which talks about the hierarchy of good karma. And the hierarchy, it starts off by giving something to a very simple being. Yeah, you give something to maybe an unvirtuous person, then you give something to a virtuous person. It kind of goes up the hierarchy. Then it's like giving a building or a dwelling to the Sangha, and then beyond that there is like taking the 3 refuges and then taking the 5 precepts, and then beyond that is having a mind moment of loving kindness. So having a mind moment of loving kindness is one of the highest kinds of good karma that you can have. But it has to be real loving kindness. Yeah, it cannot just be, oh, may all beings be happy and whatever. It has to be real, right? This is so important. So it has to be a development of real emotions inside. And if those emotions inside are very powerful and they go out to the whole world, then it is very powerful good karma. And then the Buddha says even more good karma than developing metta and compassion in this way is seeing impermanence. If you have one insight into impermanence, that is the highest kind of good karma you can make, because that is actually the thing that makes you into a noble person. And if you become a noble person, well, then of course what happens is that you abandon so much of your karma from the past. Yeah, you become liberated from that karma in the past, and you are heading towards awakening. That's why the karma is so great at that point.
There's a question, will Ajahn be covering metta meditation in this retreat?
We can cover that a little bit. We have already covered it a little bit today, because I was talking about how to overcome anger, and overcoming anger is really similar to metta. Yeah, I was talking about seeing the good qualities in people, and this is what metta meditation is about. Maybe on the last day, maybe we can do a bit more of metta meditation. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Can Ajahn take one more question?
Sure. Yeah. Take the last
Dear
one.
Ajahn, the Buddha said that dart so hard to see, stuck in the heart, in the sutta. If mental dart refers to defilements, does that mean that some defilements are hard to see, other than greed and aversion, which seemingly easily seen. And why is it hard to see? How could that be seen and plucked out then? Thanks.
I think it is hard to see for many reasons. First of all, sometimes it is hard to see why craving is a defilement at all. Why is craving even a defilement? Most people, this is difficult to understand because craving seems to be what makes the world go around. Craving is what gives us the things that we want in the world. If we don't crave, we don't do anything. So craving must be good. Yeah, it can't be bad. It must be good. Or craving is it is the agency. That is why I act. And I have to act in the world. If I didn't crave, I wouldn't be doing anything. So craving must be good because it leads to agency. It leads to the development of the world. It leads to the creation of all of these wonderful things in the world. So craving must be a powerful and good force. But seeing that craving is a problem is actually quite difficult. I think this is part of the reason why to understand it as a defilement, to understand it as a dart, takes a complete change in consciousness. It needs us to look at the world in a very different way. And that it is why it is very hard to see. Also, things in the world seem pleasurable on the surface. Yeah, this is why the world is attached to all the pleasures in the world. It seems nice. Again, this is why craving is hard to see. So this is the first reason why these things are hard to see. The second reason why they're hard to see is that these defilements in their coarse manifestation, when you see them in a coarse way, then they are easy to see. Yeah, it's easy to see craving when it's very powerful. It's easy to see anger when it's powerful. It's easy even to see delusion when it's powerful. When you are very tired or restless or whatever, you can see the confusion in the mind. You can see that kind of delusion. But these defilements also occur in very refined ways, can be very refined kinds of craving. So for example, say that you are meditating and you feel really peaceful, you feel really nice, you feel maybe even bliss in your meditation, but then it stops, it doesn't go any further. Why does it stop? It stops because there is some defilement that is blocking you, but you have no idea what it is. You feel perfectly at peace, you feel perfectly joyous and happy, so what is it that blocks you from going further? This is what I mean by the defilements being very refined. Yeah, there's still some attachment there. There's still some craving there that blocks you from going even deeper in your meditation. And of course, the defilement of delusion is even more profound because the defilement of delusion ultimately is about the whole idea of seeing a self where in fact there is no self. So this is the most powerful and most deep-seated thing of all. And of course, it's going to be very hard to see that fully.